Watch this video to see the extreme makeover of this dull, boring media cabinet into something extraordinary. Welcome again to Furniture Flipping for Profits. On this video, I'm working on this boring media cabinet that resembles a coffin more than anything. Overall, it's in pretty good shape, but it does have some damage on the top, and I'll show you how I'm going to repair that. The rest of it is just a bad case of the uglies. The first step, as always, is to clean the entire media console with a degreaser. These are the products that I use, and then rinse it well with water to ensure that you take off all those chemicals. The doors, shelves, and all the hardware was then removed. Since I was going to be installing new sleek legs, I had to remove this piece of trim. The screws were removed, but apparently it was also glued in place, so I used a screwdriver and hammer, and it popped right off. The side of the dresser now needed to be cut to the same length as the front. To ensure that the lower edge would be even, I carefully measured 3 inches from the bottom. The level was used as a straight edge to draw the cut line, and then I used a DeWalt cordless 4.5-inch circular saw to cut off this section. As you can see, there remained a little piece of the lower portion on the front of the media console, and I guess I was in the mood to take out my frustrations on a piece of furniture because I just grabbed a hammer and gave this remaining piece a whack. Well, a small piece did still remain, so I grabbed a saw and I cut it off. Later, I realized that it would have been a lot easier to remove this with my oscillating multi-tool. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but the multi-tool would have worked a lot better. I used the orbital saw then to cut off a little remaining edge on the back. I used some 1/2-inch by 4-inch pine boards that I salvaged from the dumpster to make supports for the new legs.
A key but wouldn't stay. We couldn't even start a fight. I know it's only been a week, but I can't eat, I'm losing sleep, I'm missing you.
Since these legs came pre-stained, I had to remove the finish so that I could stain them to match the top. So I used my cordless orbital sander, and I found that if I put it in my lap, I could just rotate the legs on top of the sander, and it made quick work of removing the finish. To install the legs, you screw the hardware that came with the legs onto the leg itself, and then you screw the leg onto the base. I found that the one layer of the base was not thick enough because it would have made the legs too short. So I made more of the bases and I glued 2 of the bases together. So now we had about 1.5 inches thickness to the base. And that brought the legs up to a point where they were the perfect length. I drilled pilot holes on either side of the wooden base and then used 2-inch wood screws to secure the base and the leg to the media console.
I won't be sad next Sunday.
Since I wanted to restain this media console a lighter color and the damaged area on the top left needed to be repaired, I knew I had to strip it. I used Citrus Strip. I like this product because there's no smell, and if used correctly, it works well to remove a stained or painted finish. To work effectively, I found that I need to apply a very thick coat of Citrus Strip to a horizontal surface. I tried to go over the area where I just applied it only once or twice. If you keep brushing over it like you're painting it on, you'll remove too much of it. In this case, the more, the better. The next important step for it to work effectively is to immediately cover the area with plastic. You can see I'm only working on 1/4 of the media top at a time. I did it in sections so the Citrus Strip wouldn't dry out in between. I put on a thick coat with a chip brush and then covered the area with a plastic bag. The length of time that you leave it on depends on the finish because all finishes are different.
People running off to work, no one sees how much you hurt. It doesn't matter anyway. Picked up a coffee down the street, the place we always used to meet. It's getting cold here in LA. I know it's only been 2 weeks. I can't eat, I'm losing sleep from missing you.
After 30 minutes, I pulled back the plastic and I used a putty knife to test to see if enough of the finish was coming off. It's not budging. So I reapplied the Citrus Strip over the area that I just did the test on and covered it back up.
On Sunday, I will make a brand new start. On Sunday, I will fix this broken heart.
It's now been an hour and 45 minutes since I first applied the Citrus Strip, and I pulled back the plastic, I pulled out my putty knife, and I began to scrape, and look at it coming off. I was very pleased with the fact that the finish was coming off very nicely.
I won't be sad. I'll be okay. I'll find a way inside my heart. I'll find the missing part. I'm over being sad. On Sunday, I will make a brand new start. On Sunday.
Mineral spirits is used to clean off the remaining finish and, most importantly, to deactivate the Citrus Strip. So I'm using a coarse steel wool pad and mineral spirits to clean the top.
I'll fix this broken heart. Baby, I won't be sad. Oh, maybe I won't be sad.
After I'd gone over the entire top using the mineral spirits to remove the Citrus Strip as well as the remaining finish, there was still a few areas with stubborn finish left on the far right of the top. So I used an orbital sander with 220 grit sandpaper just to sand off that remaining finish. So I only had to strip the top once. I think the Citrus Strip did a great job. I used a regular clothes steam iron on the severe scratches on the top. These scratches were so deep that sanding alone would not have made them disappear. I set the iron on the highest setting and then held the iron about 1/2 inch above the scratched area, and then I gave it a burst of steam multiple times. I waited a few seconds, felt it to see if it was causing the wood to swell, which would then cause the scratch to go away. And I repeated that until it was gone. I waited until it was completely dry, and then I slowly sanded it very carefully with 220 grit sandpaper, and you're going to see that it was completely gone. I used this same technique on the deeper gouged area on the top. It took a little longer, but eventually the wood became swollen enough to fill in the area. After it had dried, I sanded it smooth. You'll see that after the top was stained and finished, this area was indistinguishable from the rest of the top. Since the top was stained a dark mahogany color, there remained a lot of red in the wood. Ultimately, I planned to stain the top, legs, and door fronts an antique oak color, so I needed to get rid of some of the red in this top. I applied household bleach to lighten the wood 3 times, allowing it to dry 2 to 4 hours in between the next application. When using household bleach to lighten wood, it's important to neutralize the bleach with distilled white vinegar. Once the vinegar is completely dry, you can then stain it as usual. To get everything ready for priming, I scuff sanded the entire body of the media cabinet as well as the doors and all the drawers using 120 grit sandpaper. I applied a self-adhesive draping film around the perimeter of the top to protect the top that I just stripped and keep it from getting primer or paint on it. Using a damp cloth, I removed all the dust from the scuff sanding. Since this piece had a dark stain and I was going to use a light colored chalk paint, I used an oil-based primer to prevent bleed through of the stain. I pretty much only use spray primers now because I have found that it dries quickly, it leaves no brush strokes, and I only need to apply 1 coat because it has such superior coverage. And best of all, it takes a lot less time. Everything that was going to be painted received a coat of primer. After about 30 minutes, it was completely dry, and I then used a 220 grit sanding sponge to sand the entire surface just to get rid of any dust nubs that had settled on it, and then I dusted it with a damp cloth to remove all the dust from the sanding. I used Behr chalk paint in the color Gravelstone, which is also a Behr color. One of the reasons I like to use Behr chalk paint is because they can mix any color. They can even color match it to a specific color that you bring in. For example, they can match your chalk paint to the color of your drapes. I just started spraying chalk paint with an HVLP sprayer that I purchased on Amazon a few weeks ago. I purchased a very inexpensive sprayer that had very positive reviews, and the cost was only about $50. I have links to everything I use in the video description, so you can see the exact sprayer that I purchased. I've been very pleased with the sprayed finish. It takes less time, cleanup is a breeze, and the final finish is smooth and professional. I think I recovered the cost of my sprayer just in the first flip alone that I did, just because of the time savings. To spray chalk paint, it must be thinned to a specific viscosity by adding water to the paint. Here I am showing you how I determine the viscosity by timing how long it takes for the thinned paint to drain from the viscosity cup. The paint sprayer instructions indicated that it should take 40 seconds to drain from the cup. The paint is then strained with a paint strainer. Ensuring the proper viscosity and straining the paint well will make your paint sprayer last longer. Of course, when you spray chalk paint, you're exposed to more VOCs. Therefore, you need a good respirator. I consulted with an auto body painter with many years' experience, and he recommended a 3M mask. He said the fit is very important because if you can smell the paint with the respirator on, then it isn't working effectively. I applied 2 coats of paint to the entire media console and allowed it to dry in about an hour in between coats. I didn't show this on the video, but I did a little touch-up after the second coat was dry using a sponge as the applicator. I mixed a custom glaze by combining 1/2 cup of Valspar antique glaze from Lowe's with 2 tablespoons of the Behr chalk paint that I used on the media console. I then added about 1 teaspoon of burnt umber craft acrylic paint. I tested it on a piece of foam board from the dollar store to get the color just right. My goal was to give the media console a faux wood texture that's currently popular on furniture that you see in Pottery Barn and other high-end brands. To make this effect, I used a chip brush to apply the glaze in long horizontal strokes. If you like this heavy texture, you can stop there, but I wanted finer lines, so I then brushed lightly over the glaze with a deck brush. This softened the lines and made them thinner. To make them a little more apparent, I went over it one last time with the gong brush from Home Depot. I applied this glazing technique to the exterior of the dresser and the dresser fronts. I didn't apply it to the inside of the media console or to the shelves. It was really easy to apply this glazing technique, and I was very pleased with the results. This is a close-up of what it looked like. I hope you can see the texture. After the glaze was completely dry, I then applied 2 to 3 coats of polyurethane. Each of the 3 doors had inserts that could be removed. 2 were wood and 1 was glass. I primed all 3 and then painted the side facing the inside with the gravelstone color chalk paint and the side facing the outside with black chalk paint. 2 coats of polyurethane were also applied. The woven wood door fronts were made of veneer edging. I cut the edging to the width of the door inserts using a scissors and then stained them with General Finishes Antique Walnut Gel Stain. The following day, I applied 2 coats of water-based polyurethane. One-eighth-inch wood dowels were used to create the weave in the wood. The dowels were cut the vertical height of the drawer inserts and then painted with black chalk paint. When dry, 2 coats of polyurethane was applied. To develop the pattern for the woven wood, I laid everything out on one of the door inserts. I found that there was about a 1/4 inch gap at the bottom, so I cut one of the strips lengthwise to fill that gap. At this point, I realized that if I had done this step first, I would have known exactly how many strips I needed. However, since I didn't, I had quite a few leftover strips. Oh well, I'm sure I'll find a use for them in an upcoming flip. To form the woven pattern, I placed 3 of the wood dowels evenly spaced in a vertical position on the black side of the door insert. I then wove the veneer edging between these dowels. The trick to this technique is the fact that this edging can be held in place very simply. Since the glue on the back is heat activated, I used a regular household iron to heat each edge of the strip. The iron was set on high with no steam. Be certain to push the veneer edging close together so there are no gaps. After all the strips are glued in place, the edges can be cut flush with the door insert using a scissors. The wood dowels are secured with E6000 glue and held in place for 48 hours until the glue is dried. To assemble the doors, do any final trimming of the veneer edging and reinsert it into the door frame. Secure the door insert using the original hardware.
I don't know what else to do. I wanna get away from every little thing just to try to make it through. I've been thinking about my options, every detail in my head. But it doesn't really matter, nothing nothing matters, so I cry instead.
I really don't know why I left staining the top till the very last thing. There was no legitimate reason, but I did. So the last thing to do now is stain and seal the top. So the first thing I did was put a protective cover around the perimeter to protect everything else that was already finished. I used the same gel stain that I had already used on the door fronts as well as the feet and applied it to the top, and then wiped it off using blue shop towels in a long sweeping motion to ensure that it was evenly distributed. The following day, I dusted it with a damp cloth to remove any dust that had settled to the surface, and I applied a thin coat of polyurethane to the top using a sponge. I ended up applying 6 coats of polyurethane, allowing it to dry about 45 minutes to an hour in between coats.
I've been staring at the ceiling. I've been staying up all night.
The doors were reinstalled using the original latches. However, this extreme furniture makeover demanded new sleek door pulls. I chose these door pulls because I wanted something that made a statement. What do you think? Did I get it right? This furniture makeover involved a lot of steps and a new technique I'd never done before with the woven door fronts. I hope you found it informative. This media cabinet was transformed from dull to dramatic. I just might find a place for this one in my own home.
I've been asking every question, 'cause I haven't got a clue. Why's it gotta be me? What the